Hey guys, pleasure to have you all here. I'm Tom. I head up Fractal, which in short is just a super easy way to decentralize any safe by adding permissions on it, allow you to execute as a DAO as efficiently as any other project. And with us, we got some awesome lineup here. We got Willie from ShapeShift, head of decentralization. I'm gonna do your intros for you guys to keep us moving. We have Andree, who's head of governance at SafeDAO, storing all of our billions of dollars in multi-sigs and smart accounts. And we have Harry, who I haven't met before, but thank you so much for that presentation from OASIS. Definitely super interesting, your implementation of like secret ballot voting. Now, yeah, with that in mind, I always like to start, and we actually ran a Twitter Spaces of this before, and I started them with like a spicy take on DAOs and privacy at the intersection. And I'm going to throw it at you, Harry, first, because I've already got an idea of what these two will say is their spicy take. But do you have like a bit of a controversial take? From listening to your presentation, you clearly believe in composability in voting. Do you have anything that's maybe a bit more controv that you would push the boundaries of when it comes to DAOs and privacy? And we'll start there, and then we'll dive into what secret ballot voting is in more detail afterwards.
With spicy takes of, I think this is like the vocal minority of how can you take control of something like this when you have more ad hoc votes. So when there is like a formal process for this, then it feels like you can't mess around too much, but that's also like impeding a lot of this. Like loads of the decisions don't actually happen on chain. So it's almost like by the time you get to the DAO, it's just to authorize the money to be spent in a certain direction that's already been decided on, rather than all the stuff that we should be really thinking about, which is, what do we decide this? As a member of a DAO, I don't necessarily have a voice unless I'm part of the inside crew that knows what's going on. And then it's them who makes the decisions and we just ratify it. So it's not really a spicy take. It's just, I think it needs to be more granular, really, and we're not seeing that at the moment.
I love that, man. Thank you. Why don't you go, Andree? What about yourself?
It's, I think, kind of mirroring it in the sense I think that enabling privacy in DAO voting should not be like a one-size-fits-all. It's not going to solve all the problems, going to bring out a lot of new problems, especially on accountability. And so I think it should be very use case based and also being used and experimented with it like very carefully.
And we're going to deep dive a lot into some of the accountability challenges when you're private voting. I'm going to play the devil's advocate role here a little bit. Before we do that, Willie, what's your spicy take? And then I'd love for you to, for the audience here, Harry did a great job of showing that there's a lot of composability when it comes to privacy. There's not just 0 to 1, 0 private and 0 not. So when you've done your spicy take, could you also break down the different private voting solutions that you've seen in market to date and their different benefits and trade-off? And actually, maybe lean positive. What are all the benefits?
I'm good at leaning positive. I'm a pretty
You're an
optimistic
optimistic
dude.
mood,
And I'm a big believer in DAOs in general, but my spicy take, I think, is that I think the lack of truly private voting is one of the biggest missing pieces that is kind of holding back DAOs from reaching their full potential. So right now, and one of the reasons that it doesn't exist yet is just that it's really hard. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think about that we have DAOs at this scale that just don't really have the ability to do private voting, right? Like, we have private voting already from presidential elections to like student council elections in elementary schools where everyone puts their head down, right? Like, it's like almost table stakes, but it's really fucking hard to build. And so because of that, all these DAOs have grown and have built without it. So I'm very excited for when true private voting comes available as like a plugin on Snapshot. That's what we currently use at ShapeShift DAO. Right now we have shielded voting. So if you guys haven't heard of shielded voting, it's kind of one of the best, most private voting you can have right now with Snapshot at least. And it basically keeps the results of the vote private during the voting period, which already that's very nice. It helps reduce bias when people are reading the proposal and deciding how they're going to vote. It's pretty interesting, like going from having fully public voting results to not being able to see the voting results. It took a little bit of time for the community to get used to, but I think overall we've agreed that it's beneficial and the community is pretty happy with it. We're pretty excited for once fully private voting gets solved, where the results of the voting are actually hidden forever. You can see who voted, you can see how much voting power they have, but you can't see what they voted for. Very excited for that to become available for the community to implement it. I think it's much needed, and I think it's especially relevant when it comes to like firing people. It's kind of really hard to fire people, you can imagine, especially like people with a lot of authority or influence in the DAO, or maybe people who have people in the DAO that work for them. Basically, it's like kind of hard to vote against your boss, basically, in public. So, until that gets solved, I think it's gonna be hard for DAOs to reach their full potential.
Was it you last time you said that like in a DAO it's really easy to start something, it's really hard to stop something?
100%.
And that involves like hiring and firing as well. No one talks about firing people in a DAO, but it's like
It's not fun to talk about, but sometimes you got to do it.
yeah, that was awesome. Okay, so we're gonna play devil's advocate here a little bit. So like, and this is someone from me who's building in private voting right now, so I'm not a devil's advocate, but like, you know, like I quoted last time, like this idea of like auditability and this idea of accountability is two of the most important features in a DAO. And I would argue transparency is as well. Transparency of like at least how decisions are made. So is there a trade-off from the purism of what a DAO is? And is there specific situations where maybe you don't want privacy? Maybe I'll jump in with you, Andree, first, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, I wouldn't answer this from the puristic version. I think I don't think that's the central point of it, that you need absolutely every single vote transparent for it to be a pure DAO. I think the main differentiation is if you're doing it with your own voting power or if you have delegate voting power and you're voting on someone else. Because if you are only accountable to yourself, well then it's fine, right? Like it can be completely private. There's a lot of arguments in favor for that. You don't have any repercussions. You can freely voice, like you can freely form your opinion. You can voice it in private then. But once you offer yourself to become a delegate and vote on and use someone else's voting power, you have accountability towards them and also towards the system. So because like how would I be able to hold a delegate accountable if I don't know what they're gonna vote on? And I think it's a little bit like what we see if we vote in nation states. I'm voting with my own voting power, and that is private. But like if the elected delegates vote, then usually it's public, and you'll be able to see and put it against lobby registers and so on, and then you have like a clearer picture why they might vote in a certain way or another. So I think, to narrow it down, I think that's the main differentiation. And in DAOs we have a lot of obfuscation in the sense of like one is not sure. A delegate is not just voting with other people's voting power, it's also their own voting power. So it becomes like a mixture of it. And a delegate is not only a delegate, but a delegate is maybe also a working group member. They're also maybe a grantee in a different DAO. And so we have like a lot of interests that are then involved. And I think, privacy enabling voting is just a tool out of it. But there's so many other path dependencies and problems because a delegate is not like a politician, not just there to represent, but basically they're also on the other end of these votes.
And yeah, I'm going to bring this to you now, Harry, because this is a nuanced topic. To your point, we're going to come to this. This is also a technically difficult topic. But to start on like the nuance of pros and cons, like Harry, what are the pros and cons? Hearing those two things, what are the pros and cons for you? And I'd like to also, because yours is a really composable solution, which I completely applaud. Like that is exactly how for governance needs to be. And I think starting off-chain on that and then building it on-chain is a right path to that. But can we push this further? We've already covered like, maybe if you're voting for headcount, privacy's good. Like let's just broad stroke that. Maybe if you're delegating stuff, there can be challenges with privacy. You're being delegated and you're representing stuff. Where else do you see like this composable kind of voting, maybe on a per proposal basis being interesting? Like are there certain types of like, does grants maybe need to be public or private? Do, for example, like proposals that actually move on-chain funds, do, let's say, setting up budgets of work streams? Like I can't think of all of them, but like which one should be private and which one should be public? Let's all push ourselves a little bit here.
Sure. So I think all the stuff that's probably private as well. So I think if you've got your just a real world sort of environment that you work in, if you're in an office, right? You've got maybe like up to a few hundred people that are in your sort of little social circle, and between like the opinions and your groups of friends, you don't necessarily mind about privacy because everyone knows what's going on. But it would also be good to have these open up the opinion, so you don't have people talking behind your back. So you can create these sort of these opinions, and sort of it's like tweeting, but with credence to it. So with an additional weight of, this is not just my opinion, I'm not just talking, and to be able to use that as to take that further up, or use that as part of like the group forming process, and then you end up with I don't know, with privacy you could end up with like unleashing the beast almost, where no one's really sure what's going on or who's driving this, but somehow half the office now hates the boss or something like that, and I don't know, you're not really sure where the sort of anarchic side of things is going to kick in and take over whatever culture is already there, if you give it free rein to do so. So I think that's a concern.
Well, go on.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I generally lean towards flexibility, especially with DAOs. Like there's so many different types of DAOs, so many use cases, no one size fits all. So I generally lean towards like giving the community the option to decide if they want to make stuff private, if they want to be public. But there's definitely, I think challenges where if you give people the option to choose whether their vote is public or private, then kind of like we talked about earlier, it's harder to vote no. It's scarier. There's more potential for pushback for voting no on something, I think. So I expect what might happen is that people who vote yes vote publicly, and then if people assume that whoever votes privately is just voting no. So I do imagine that we'll see communities that just require that every vote is private for final voting, and I think that can make sense. And generally, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think I would be in favor of doing that for a lot of the DAOs that I'm a part of. But I imagine there will also be use cases for DAOs that want everything to be completely public, or want the delegates to be required to be public, for example. I think that's a good point.
Just before you go, Andree, I just want to dive into one aspect of in real life you're using, shielded voting on thing. One challenge you kind of alluded to before is this idea of getting used to it, because quorum is hidden too. Now, I actually haven't checked what ShapeShift's quorum is, but could you imagine there being a DAO who's maybe struggling to get voter participation, who doesn't want to not see quorum for this very reason?
Yeah, so when shielded voting first launched, quorum wasn't visible, but now, as far as I understand, quorum is now visible, and so definitely we noticed it lacking. We wanted it. There is a cool concept of soft quorum, so if any community is worried about that, you can check out ShapeShift's governance process. There's a soft quorum, which is a way to basically, if you don't meet quorum, you can still pass votes, but you assume that 70% of the remaining votes needed to get quorum would vote against it. We borrowed that from Gitcoin, and feel free to fork it if that's something you're concerned about.
All right, Andree, on to you.
And as you also asked, what are kind of the use cases where privacy voting really makes a lot of sense? Or you talked about head count. I think it's everywhere where money is involved. So and that can be voting on working group members, that can be voting on initiatives that are being funded, it can also be where something gets deployed and what kind of economic consequences that has. Maybe one example is when ApeCoin DAO now voted on where ApeChain is going to be, and these providers voted on themselves, right? So you're able to see this now. And I think their private voting makes a lot of sense, because I think that's the only way right now where all of these roles and stakeholders are kind of mixed together, that they vote exactly how their own opinion is. Because I think the largest criticism delegate would form is maybe abstaining. So abstaining would be almost no, and if you really want to vote no, you don't vote at all, and then it becomes a game of quorum kind of. So and then people will start thinking, okay, if I now vote no, I'm gonna push this over quorum. So it becomes very gamified and pretty complex, to the sense actually that the best is not to vote at all if you vote no on it. And I think there's so many other things also to be solved around it. For instance, the feedback that we hear is delegates saying okay, I'm interested in other delegates, how they vote and why they vote this way. So I think that they look at it, then they see the trusted peers, and they say, okay, so they derive information out of this. But that just shows that maybe the whole system doesn't work that way. It should have been maybe on the forum. It should have been in public. So they take this information from the voting decision, whereas they should have taken that information from the discussions that were there beforehand.
Yeah, and I've got to jump in now, because I'm gonna imbue the energy of Oren from Gnosis Guild, who can't be with us today. He's just landing, but he was meant to be on this panel as well. Now, he's a purist, right? For him, every vote should be private forever. And I think everyone on this panel seems to lean more to composable, let the DAO decide, blah, blah, blah. Let me channel him for a bit here. I was at a regov yesterday, run by Reserve Protocols, all DeFi, DAOs, talking about governance. And the idea of voter incentives came up as like, and let's for now assume the vote incentives to vote in a certain way, i.e. bribes. Let's just call it a bug, not a feature. It's a confusing topic, but for now, let's just assume it's a bug. Now, as soon as you have the option of voting publicly and seeing how you voted, Oren would argue that always imbues an error of a lack of a robust vote, because you can always, if you see someone's vote, if it's an on-chain vote, money will try to incentivize that vote. Now, you had an amazing discussion about this last time, Oren, so I'd love for you to like challenge that theory, maybe talk to it, and then maybe someone else could pick up after you. Sorry.
First, I'm wondering like around bribing. You can only bribe like officials usually, right? Like you don't bribe, like private people cannot be bribed under like the legal definition. Like it's usually somebody who has an official position that is trusted, should be neutral. And so first of all, like maybe you can bribe delegates, but you cannot bribe someone with their own voting power. That could already be a differentiation, because that is maybe just like incentives, motivation. Just putting that out there. But even if it's like the not a feature, but it's a bug, I think that people will always find ways of kind of reaching out to someone with voting power and have that confirmed if it's on-chain or not. And just to put it completely simple, if we have completely private voting and I reach out to someone, I promise them a benefit or a reward if they vote a certain way, they will be able to prove that. And if it's as easy as sending a screenshot, or if it's like being in person, building up a relationship with your briber, like in the sense of like maybe it's not a one-off, maybe like there's also a reputation. And I think that like the social behind it like will always be there, so people will always be able to bribe. It's not going to be just because now it's on-chain. Maybe there is the more technical thought of bribing in the sense of that it's being done automated or so on, then there's like bribing platforms, maybe that doesn't work, but if there is a trust relationship between the token holder and the briber, there will be ways of proving that.
Harry, one you got, that's...
Sure, I don't really see a problem with giving people money in return for voting. Like, you know, if I'm a delegate, why aren't I paying them for supporting my opinion, right? So I'm not sure. I think let's, tokenize your votes. Sell them, at least if there is some kind of profit in there, then you want to be part of this. And why not have, in return for this winning, we're going to give everyone, a pot of like $10,000, right? Because that in itself is encouraging participation. And I know a lot of like with the delegates problem, you do want to have their track history, because you're essentially saying, I want you to continue voting how you're voting because I believe in you to go that direction. But in terms of like participation, that's a failure of having to have this sort of hierarchy of delegation. So maybe there should be incentivization, there should be bribery for people to actually participate and think, well, is it worth $1 or do I really actually want to do this? So until you start to price it, it's just like an opinion, and yeah, you might not actually give the right opinion without considering money in the loop.
I think ultimately it's up to the community, and here's two great examples of like how it depends, right? And I think there's use cases like there's literally some DAOs like Curve where bribing is very much a feature of governance. It is not; they do not consider it a bug. It's designed that way, right? So, but I can totally see projects and communities that say no, we do not want bribing, or we want to at least make it as hard to bribe as possible. So we're gonna, require that every vote is private. So yeah, I think it all depends. Generally, if anyone wants to bribe anyone to vote, I'm happy to get paid to vote. I do think that in general, there's some challenges just with like incentivizing voting for the sake of voting, and then that will just get people to just vote without actually paying attention to the proposal. So got to be careful there. But yeah, anything is possible. That's one of the cool things. But certainly, what we need is we at least need the option to be able to require private voting, and I'm excited that folks here are building that.
Nice one. I actually have no idea how much time we have left. One more question? Cool. let's get just a little bit technical on this last question. You mentioned some of the encryption methods you're using for privacy. As you mentioned, is a really fucking hard topic. I've explored, for example, zero knowledge. I've explored fully homomorphic encryption. I've explored SGX, and I'm really interested to why you chose that solution. For those who are a bit more technically minded, could you talk to some of those trade-offs in those different technologies when you're talking about private voting, and maybe the differentiation when you're talking about off-chain voting versus like when it actually moves eventually on-chain, which has to be an option that we all want to?
Well, I'll start with all of this stuff. My demo was on-chain, so it's all verifiable there. But really, it's the back channels that are off-chain, and there are always going to be back channels wherever you are. But from the technical aspect, I spend a lot of time doing ZK systems, anonymity, privacy sets, privacy coins, things like semaphore. We're doing set membership, and yeah, it works. And you can have these contracts. So you can have a secret that you keep from the contract and everywhere else at the same time. But it's very limited. So once you have programmed your ZK circuit, you have to sometimes go through quite a rigorous sort of ceremony to finalize that, to show that it can be trusted, that you don't have some backdoor to it. And then if you want to have like 5 variations of that for different types of voting privacy, then that becomes really complicated really quickly. And it's just very rigid and sort of inflexible in that regard. With multi-party computation, again, you need hardware that's running, that's actively doing just this one protocol. So it's not like a general purpose. So you have to sort of, there are whole startups that their entire thing would be the equivalent of, let's do a multi-party protocol for private voting. That's their entire job. And this is, with Intel SGX, is really a case of it's a trusted enclave. I don't have to bother with the math or thinking about like, is this a pure function? I can just read and write to storage, do whatever I want there. And it's so much easier. So it's like, I love ZK, MPC's cool, but I want this stuff now and not in 10 years time when, the PhDs have finished their researching and you've got a cottage industry of like ZK DAO experts. So yeah, I just wanted something that works. And that's why I've ended up in this sort of situation, because it's the sweet spot of other people can plug in their Solidity components, and that changes the privacy model however they want to. Whereas with ZK, that would be a big long effort, and redeploy contracts and change circuits and go through the proving ceremony again. And yeah, it's not that feasible. So I'm all for quicker, faster.
I love that. Any last words from you two? Because I think I'm getting kicked off.
I wanted to ask just about that. So with the SGX solution, is there not like a network of nodes basically? Is it something that you just deploy on chain and doesn't require a ton of like maintenance or upkeep? Or is there a network that needs to provide that?
There is a network of nodes there, yeah. But they're general rather than task specific, yeah.
Cool.
Anything else from you, Andree? All right, thank you so much. We got some serious people here, so thanks everyone. That was amazing.